Hey everybody, it's been a bit since I've made a video, but Special Booster 2.5 came out on Friday, and I thought that I'd put out a tier list video of my meta predictions for you. We have some new decks and more things to look out for, so I just wanted to give you all an idea on where I think things are going to be at. This is probably going to change over time, especially now that America and the global meta has tied up with the JP meta. I imagine that we're all going to be doing some deck building and testing over the course of the next few months. But, for now, this is what things are going to be looking like going into the format. If you want to know why I rate things how I do in particular, then please go watch one of my past videos. I specifically have one that is like why I rate things where I do and how I think about decks in particular. I should have a little tag up top so that you can click on that and go and watch it if you'd like. But for now, I'm going to get into the tier list and I'm just going to show an image immediately. I'm going to talk a bit about all of the ones in tier 1 and some of the ones in tier 1.5, and I'm going to talk about the new decks after so you're aware. But for now, let's get right into it. So at the top of tier 1, we have Royal Knights, which has had a huge new bit of support with Omni X, Cool Boy, and the new Omekamon, as well as the new option. It is currently the defining deck of the format. It is a bit of a grind game deck, so if you like a grind game, then be aware. This is probably the one for you. But know that games can go a bit long, even though Omni X gives it more aggro before you do your final like blowout turn, it still can go long because you're trying to find the Omnimon to end the game with. And it is a bit of a removal suite with legs. So be aware. The way that you build it can change how you play it, but in particular, it's mostly a big removal pile that also just does some rush down right at the end. We also, in second place, have Imperial Mon Virus. Basically, it's a deck that plays a ton of guys, goes wide fairly quickly when things die, also has like a handful of effects so that you can get up into the Imperial Mon faster. The new Imperial Mon Fighter mode is very good, and the effects on it are really good. So expect to see it if you have a person at your local who's willing to pay $70 for the promo Shadramon. uh, yeah, it's a good deck. It's a really good deck. Unfortunately, it's kind of price gated in a way that the other good decks aren't, but if it's a playstyle that you like, makes sense. In third, I have Mirage. Mirage may be getting a limit soon because we know that a limit list is coming up, but still. So you're aware, it's very good currently, and if they don't touch it, which would be surprising at this point, it is gonna be a great deck still. So if you've been playing the blue dog for the last 5 or 6, 7 formats, you can continue doing so until that thing gets limited. And then I have regular Imperial Mon in fourth, top of tier 1. It just has so much support and it can do its thing so consistently. Even though it has DNA deck problems sometimes, it's still really, really good. And I don't anticipate any limits on it. So it's probably pretty safe to play if you've been playing it for a while. Um, Tier 1.5 are my competitive decks, but they have some flaws that get in the way. Specifically, Fenrir Takumi Kazuchi, even though it's a very good deck, is here because even though it is good, and it is very good, it is a high roll deck. I kind of think that they might limit something in the deck, so it may fall off a little bit. I hope that if they do, it's only like a consistency piece because the deck is fun. I just know that they may do something about it because in JP, when that deck wins, it can be a kind of like feels bad thing, especially because it's a best of one and the limit list is built around the JP format, as far as I'm aware. We also have Purple Hybrid, which may be getting a limit as well, and if it does, it will definitely fall down the tier list a bit. But that deck is not the most consistent, but when it pops off very well, because hybrids are very difficult to interact with. Gallantmon X is still incredible. It's very good, and the fact that your opponent needs to move the memory over to your side to affect you is a thing that really is going to get in the way. If you are playing against Royal Knights, they're going to have to hard drop something for much higher cost to try and remove your guy, which puts you in a pretty decent situation. We have Taomon Loop after that. It is a very good deck, but it is extremely high roll. I know that JP currently is toying around with a yellow base list so that they can have a bit more consistency. The red base goes extremely hard, and once they get going, it's really, really good. It's just the getting going. You have a lot more setup turns than most other decks that are very good at this point. So there's that. We have Rocks. Rocks is really good. Rocks has seen some very good competitive play. It's topped events. I just think that it needs another wave of support for it to be like a meta defining deck. As it is, it's currently pretty good. And if you have all your pieces for it, then keep rolling with it. Pretty great. We have Zafagamon. I think that Zafagamon is quite good now with the new support, especially because the new Ace can digivolve on top of Medieval Gallant because it is a Vortex Warrior. I think that it's a good deck. I'm not sure how good. I haven't seen a ton of people testing with it yet, but I do expect it to be competitive, at least much more competitive than most of the other Liberator decks other than Rocks. After that, I have Red Hybrid, and I have Birds next to it because I count the Birds deck as like a Red Hybrid deck now, mostly. That deck is extremely good. The aggro that Red Hybrid has is really powerful and can come out of nowhere very quickly. It just has some problems with consistency and it can be beaten by quicker decks, but that's about it. Birds pop real, real hard once they go hard. I have Jesmon GX behind it. I think that it's a very good deck. I think that currently people are deciding how best to build the deck, and I think that that's holding it back a bit. Once people know what they want to do with it, I think that it's going to potentially move up this list a bit. But for now, the payoff is really good, and I think that if you're interested in the deck, get cooking. I think that it's worth the cook. It's just going to be a thing where we're not going to see results for it for a bit until people figure out the ratios. Magnamon X, always good, never bad. That's about it. Lucemon, is here where it's towards the bottom of tier 1.5, specifically because it has some matchup issues. But I will be going over it a bit more later. Lucemon has an extremely good matchup into Royal Knights and also into Purple Hybrid. So I think that it could be a sleeper rogue pick because of that, especially depending on what the ban list looks like. But for now, I have it towards the bottom of tier 1.5. Deck is really good, but it is a grind game deck, and if that's your sort of thing, great. If not, be aware of it. Like, refresh yourself on everything that it does, especially if you're playing Royal Knights, because you are going to have a very hard time with that deck. Believe you me. Also, we have the blue hybrid deck. This is specifically the one that's like skipping everything. It's just running the ancient stuff. Um, it's quite good. It's not the most consistent, but that's what you run Ukomon for. It's good. If you want to play it, keep playing it. It's not bad. It's just not nearly as good as everything else is. Um, so we're gonna get into tier two stuff. I'm just gonna go over some of the broad strokes of things. The Chronicle deck is decent, has an okay payoff. The problem is that Alphamon Oryuken himself doesn't do very much once he's on the board, unless you have an Oryumon under it. Yeah, he just gets you some memory back. He's a nice floodgate on your opponent's turn, but also the core of the deck is kind of slim, and you're using old, like, Dorumon stuff to fill it out that isn't really designed to work with this deck in the way that it functions. We have Doragora. Doragora has gotten some new support. I am not sure how good the new support is for the deck yet, but it could technically be tier 1.5. I'm just not aware and I want to be safe with it. Necromon, I think, could technically be bottom of tier 1.5. The big problem with it is it needs a second wave of support. It's lacking rookies in archetype currently. And once you have a bit more options to go with, it'll be great. Um, Metal Seedramon, really good deck, does interesting things. I've yet to see what all it does, so I have it here for now. It could be higher. It could be one of those pilot skill dependent decks, but yeah. Everything else has been here since last set, except for heavy metal. I think heavy metal is a fun deck. I think the new Ace gives it things that it needed, but I'm not sure how much it'll actually do for the thing. Everything else has been in tier 2 for a while. I would like to see the puppet deck get some more support. I think that it could be good if it had more support. For now, it's around here. Everything else just kind of does the things that it does. And if you're a person who plays Beelsmon will still pop off if you like high roll well. It's just currently it's a little bit behind the pace of the game. Pilot skill dependent is pretty self-explanatory. We have your, you know, decks that are kind of niche. I would like to highlight specifically Metallic and Volcanic. I will be talking about them later. I think that currently we are not seeing the full potential of that deck, especially now that we have the new promo. And I think that if a person cooks on that one well, it could see at least top of tier 2, maybe bottom of tier 1.5 play. Um, yeah. We also have good, but nobody's playing them. We have the new deck based around the VPET in here. We have Machine in here, which, is going to be getting more support very shortly. So we'll see with that. Examon is very good. It's just a little bit dependent. Blue Hybrid focusing on, you know, the like multicolor blue top end is here. I think it's decent. I've just never seen anybody actually play it in earnest. D Brigade is still a good deck. It's just maybe not on pace with how things are ending at the moment. Ice Snow I thought was going to be a lot better than it is, but I think that Hexablaumon has completely outstripped Freya for like what is actually viable on the deck. Gatekeeper to the format, we have Mother Shoto. Specifically, that's there just because if you can't beat it, then you probably can't really play in any competitive capacity at the moment. Granted, you're not seeing that deck nearly as much as we were for a very long time, but it is something to be aware of. And then for fun at locals, we have the new Invisimon deck. I'm not sure that I'll see that pop off, but we have Lilithmon, which I wanted to be much better than it is, but the fact that you're waiting for opponent interaction most of the time is honestly a huge issue. We also have Nature Spirits, which is decent, but needs a better payoff than Plalic. We also have Wargray, and we have Metal Garuru. I'm not sure that the upcoming support is actually going to help either of these decks. I think that Adventure is probably going to be its own thing, and we'll see how that looks as we get revealed more stuff from the upcoming sets. But yeah, for now, that's basically everything. I'm going to go into more specific decks if you like the content that I make. I make longer deck profiles. I'm going to be making some about this set coming up soon. And yeah, if you just wanted my opinion, there's my opinion. I'll be doing a short overview on a few decks, new ones, and then two kind of anti meta things after this. So if you'd like to stick around for that, please do. If not, please like and subscribe. I make content a bit more infrequently than I used to, but I'm going to be trying to do it more frequently now. So we have Royal Knights. Royal Knights have the most and the best support this set for new stuff. Royal Knights greatly benefit from the ace mechanics and how they work, especially because the Royal Knights are like some of the most beloved Digimon in the game and the fan base. They're slowly accumulating better and better effects with time, especially on play ones, because they're remembering to give the new ones on play ones a lot of the time. Currently, the deck runs as a removal suite that's trying to get to the point that you can drop your Omnimon as quickly as possible, cutting a lot of the less useful knights for more strong generic removal. And if you aren't aware, specifically, this is a game mechanics thing. Ace Overflow does not trigger when a card is tucked under another card. So Alphamon or you can when it's sucked under, the ace one is sucked under Yggdrasil, uh, basically you don't lose the memory. So you're fine to just drop it. But basically you can like play it for free with this deck relatively early, and you can do a minus 15k DP to something and generally get 3 memory back at some point without having overflow, which is incredibly powerful. The piece that makes this so viable, though, is the suite of support around Coolboy, Omekamon, and OmniX. So, Coolboy is 4 play cost. You play him, and then when your Digimon are played or Digivolve into anything that have Royal Knight trait by suspending that Tamer, or suspending Coolboy, you draw 1, gain a memory. Very good, very useful. Comes up all the time. Also, opponent's turn, when any of your Digimon with Royal Knight trait would be deleted or leave the battlefield in any way, you can play an Omekamon from your hand for free without paying the cost. So you get to potentially go into an Omni on your opponent's turn if they remove something, and also if they swing into your security. Omekamon is quite good. The 5 play cost one that when it dies plays under your Yggdrasil stack helps you with getting things out cheaper, quicker. But also when you have, sorry, when they hit your security, you can suspend your Yggdrasil stack to play out the Omekamon, and he's a blocker, and when he dies he'll just go right back under. But also, if you know that they're playing an OTK deck, you can wait until they clear enough security to drop the Omekamon and do the warp into OmniX, and OmniX is like the best thing in this deck. OmniX, when you warp on top of Omekamon, Omekamon counts as X antibody in sources, so he gets to do his full thing. Basically, you choose one of your Digimon and you choose one of your opponent's Digimon, everything else is deleted, and then you get to bottom deck something. Even if you don't Digivolve on top of Omekamon on your opponent's turn, when you play the Omnimon X, you get to bottom deck something, because then put something to the bottom of the deck is a separate clause and does not require to have X antibody under it, so it's still removal. He's basically the strongest wipe in the game right now. And also the new option, which I have not mentioned in the text here specifically, is 4 play cost to search the top 3, and you can add a Royal Knight or a Cool Boy. Uh, and when you have all of your Yggdrasils in the stack, it plays for 1. Very good. Let's see. Next, we have Virus Imperial. Um, It's gotten a new wave of support to set in conjunction with the promo Shadramon and Dino B from BT16. It's extremely aggro, and it has a good bit of recursion. While the deck existed previously, its new tools have added greatly to the amount of aggro and floating that it can do. Shadramon and Dino B have wild digivolving effects that quickly pump up the size of your board, so you can immediately DNA into your Imperial Dragon stuff. And the new fighter mode has a Crimson Blaze effect that keeps your opponent from playing things by effect, and an effect to pop a boss monster anytime security is removed from. So, all turns, once per turn, when your opponent's security is removed from, you pop something with DP lower than the card. It's at least going to be 13. So, generally, you'll be popping something every turn, and when it dies, you get just a handful of on deletion effects that make a new board. It's really sticky as like a threat because it's increasingly easy for the deck to keep up a decent amount of aggro, and even when your threats are removed after you built up your trash a bit, you can just keep playing things out. It's very good. It is just really unfortunate how price gated it is by the Shadramon promo. It was similar to Magnamon X with the Flame when that promo came out. Like, you can run the deck without it, but it is much better with it. So much so that it's extremely noticeable, unfortunately. Then we have Taomon Loop. Taomon Loop has been kind of a boogeyman for the format for like the global meta. A lot of us have been looking forward to it for quite a bit. It's fallen off a bit in the meantime since we first saw it in Japan. It's good, but it's definitely like a high roll deck. You should think of it as something like Fenrir Lugamon style OTK deck. If the player sees their pieces, they can do things that are just going to win them the game. Unlike Fenrir though, it has wide-ranging consistency issues due to the amount of cards it needs to combo off and the deck's inability to search for two of them. For the cycle of your ace, you play Taomon Ace for 5 on your turn, and then you can use an option for free, and then you go into Kazuhamon, which you can then use an option for free, play the Taomon out, and loop options up and down so you can make a bunch of different bodies, right? But for each cycle, you need Taomon Ace to start. You don't need it continuing, right? But you need green plugin to digivolve into Kazuhamon and a draw option or a scramble for any loop after the and like for any after the first loop, you need a ruin mode to end on. So ideally, you go Taomon Ace, green scramble, Kazuhamon, draw option, back into playing out the Taomon Ace, green plugin into another Kazuhamon. You use yellow scramble to digivolve the first Kazuhamon that's still on the board into a ruin mode, which plays out Ace, which you use green plugin again to go into a Kazuhamon, and then use another scramble to do another ruin mode to play out the Taomon Ace again, and then you use some form of option to end. If you can end on a Sakuyamon that does the draw two, and then when you play an option, you get a blocker as well. You'll end on minus 10 blanket DP and 5 bodies off of one combo. But a lot of the time, you end after one or two loops because you don't have enough cards in your hand and you can only draw so much. Currently, the red base is seen as the more explosive one. It is very good when it pops off. The yellow one is a bit more consistent. The issue is that you take up a lot of spots that you could be using for getting and finding your options to instead be recurring your options. So you're going from one huge combo turn to a few smaller combos over time, which is fair and does work. It's just a thing to be aware of if you're looking at the yellow version. Also, we have Jesmon GX. There isn't really a wide consensus on how to build the new Jesmon GX focus deck yet, and there are some alternate ideas on playing Sistermons and Genku, specifically in Puppet Engine, which is neat, and I'm going to be looking into that. I may make a video on it, especially considering I made the, you know, big video on the Puppet engine and the Puppet deck in the first place. But Jesmon GX Ace is a very potent payoff for the archetype, and once people find a good build, I expect this deck to do very well and do better than it's been doing in Japan at the moment. The new Genku X gives blanket protection from Digimon effects until the end of their turn, as well as reboot and blocker on anything that basically would be in the deck. And it helps you maintain your board long enough to go into the new boss monster. The new Jesmon GX Ace on play, when digivolving and when attacking, you delete something smaller than it, which is kind of nuts because it's 16k. And when you do that, you get to slot something under, which helps with its other effect. So when attacking once per turn, you get to unsuspend and trash the top of your opponent's security for each 2 Royal Knights under it. And considering most times you'll have a minimum of 2 under the stack, and potentially 4 to start from Jesmon, Genkumon, Jesmon X Antibody, and Genkumon X Antibody, you're going to rip through security really quickly. This deck goes very fast once you're in the end state. I think it's mostly just a matter of what the build is and figuring out what the build is. At the moment, we also have Alphamon Chronicle. This deck is mostly just fine. It's fairly consistent. The issue is that it may need another wave of support to make the Chronicle specific version of the deck better. The payoff isn't huge by any means, but it helps that it can produce a fairly consistent conga line of assholes to replace itself in the back or set up a DNA play later on. The new payoff in the deck, like in its own deck, isn't the most incredible. The thing that helps keep up the aggro is the new BT20 Orumon that when it's on the board pops the smallest body when security stacks are removed from on both players' turns, and Alphamon's minus 8k DP minus. I said minus twice, regardless. On the same condition. So like when a security is removed from. Um, Alphamon or you can Ace itself is one of the most powerful DP minus effects in the game, and the memory floodgating on your opponent's turn is really nice, and you gain 3 on your turn if you remove a security as well, but it primarily wins through the Orumon inherit trashing security, and that's not the best, realistically. It's just kind of a thing where it has some protection because when it would leave the battlefield, you can instead remove the top of your security to keep it around, and then you get your security being removed effects if you haven't done that already that turn. It's just not ideal. The payoff is good, but the fact that Alphamon or you can doesn't really consistently do things when it's on the board is kind of a problem. It could be better, it could be worse. And if we get some more lines up to the level 6 to help it out that aren't specifically old Dorumon X antibody stuff, it will probably be much better for it. Also, we have the Necromon deck. This is the deck that I'm looking most forward to getting the second wave of support. Even with only the initial support, it's incredibly potent for a tier 2 deck. But when it has more options for Digimon slots, it's going to be much stronger. The core of the strategy is to stack on deletion effects in your inherits and attack with Necromon at the end of your turn with Execute and trigger a cascade of deletion effects, which will float into other Digimon. And then when a Ghost is deleted, Violet, once you play something in, can let you digivolve into something for reduction. So you go into Necromon again and have even more value come out of it. Um, it's just kind of like a purple value machine, and this is exactly the sort of gameplay that I personally love, and I think is going to be in tier 1.5 or tier 1, depending on what they print to support it in future. But at the moment, it's maybe a bit shy of seeing like top tier competitive play. Though I expect people will be playing it and trying to cook with it until that point. And also, we have two anti-meta picks. I did mention them previous in this video, but I just wanted to highlight them in particular. Uh, with the new Hina, I think that Dragon Link with Volcanic Dramon and Metallic Dramon is one of the sleeper meta contenders at the moment. I haven't seen it be played enough to say definitively, but I think with some time put into deck building and testing, it could be top of tier 2, maybe bottom tier 1.5. The thing is that in the current meta, Volcanic itself is pretty incredible, especially against Royal Knights. Being able to, when attacking, delete the lowest like DP guy on your opponent's board each turn when Royal Knights usually only fields 1 or 2 bodies a turn is kind of nuts. And it's just genuinely fairly good. Granted, the D-Digivolve doesn't really work against that deck, but against everything else, I think it's going to be fairly great. It's just sort of the thing that there isn't a list that I've seen that's super consistent yet. And I think with the new Hina, there are definitely ways to get it to a point where it gets to do the thing that it wants to do consistently. But the number one thing, like the number one anti-meta deck at the moment is Lucimon, I think. I put it like to the bottom or the middle of tier 1.5 earlier, but I think I need to say here, depending on the matchup, it is much, much stronger. Into both Royal Knights and Purple Hybrid, it has an incredible matchup. We've seen it have some competitive success recently, but with hybrids, it has Tamer Hate, so it can interact even with a traditionally empty board. You don't need to focus on Digimon stuff, and you can make your opponent delete their own security so that you can end the game much faster. And with the knights, they only have 1 or 2 pieces at a given time that they will need to keep on board to be able to end the game. So they're constantly going to need to make bad decisions to either not keep their royal knights and then they, have a much later time that they'll end up winning, or keep on trashing security and then maybe not hit their Omnimon quick enough to actually end the game, especially as you start to recover. Lucimon's like a grind deck. It's a long game deck, and it really makes your opponent make a lot of bad decisions for themselves over the course of it. It is very good. The one problem that it has is that it can just be beaten by rushdown decks. The reason why I have it so low on tier 1.5 is that against like decks like Gallantmon or things that just do not care about its effects because you're tearing through security so quickly, it folds very fast. But against another grind deck like Royal Knights or against something that can't ignore its deletion stuff, it is much, much better. So keep an eye on it. There's a reason that those cards are expensive. But anyway, that's it for now. Please like and subscribe, share this with your community or friends who are getting into the competitive scene or would like an idea of what to play this format and a broad overview of the new decks. My Twitter and Twitch are LainTCG. I am making a bit more content and I'm streaming a bit more. Currently, I will be testing decks on Twitch when the client is updated, but I'm also doing a Master Duel Masochist thing if you're interested in Yu-Gi-Oh on there. I also have my model, my original model by Be a Big Shot or Adarabiato on Twitter. My chibi model, which is the one that I'm using now, is by Feral on Twitter and Twitch. My cursor model is by VeniVidiVT on Twitter, and my banner is by Yo-Yoms on Twitter, and my logo is by Pinky Bird on Twitter and VGen. Thank you for watching, and good luck at your locals. See you next time.